Good evening and welcome to this special board meeting for the Hollister School District. And I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:01. And we'll do roll call. Trustee Toasty?
Here.
Trustee Martinez?
Here.
Trustee Grist?
Present.
Trustee O'Connor? Here. And I am here. And so can somebody lead us in the flag salute?
Ready, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 4 is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we pass 5-0. Item 5 is public comments.
No public comments.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, item 6, public hearing on the sufficiency of instructional materials for 2023-24.
You open the public hearing?
I open the public hearing.
No comments? So you can close the public.
Oh. No comments, so I close the public hearing. Thought that things needed to be said.
We have an adoption. The next item is an adoption.
Okay, item 6A is an adoption of resolution number 11:2324, sufficiency of instructional materials.
Do we have to make a motion for this, for the adoption?
Yes. So based on California Education Code, the local educational agency, which is us, is notifying the board that we have a resolution that states that we have sufficient textbooks and instructional materials in reading, language arts, mathematics, science, history, social science that are aligned to the content standards and consistent with the contents and cycles of all curriculum frameworks as adopted by the State Board of Education. So at this time, we ask for the board to consider the approval of resolution number 11.
On the resolution, at the bottom, it says, now therefore it be resolved that for the 21-22 school year, the district has approved each pupil with the sufficient textbooks and instructional materials. Could we change that to read 23-24?
Mine doesn't say that.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Martinez, for catching that. Yes,
Oh, I
we
see
will
it now.
make
Yeah,
that
it's in the
correction.
bold.
Thank you.
It's in the bold.
Yes.
Good eye.
Okay, so you move, or I can move, to approve the resolution 11-2324 in the matter of sufficiency of instructional materials with the amendment to the last paragraph that we go for the 2023 to 2024 school year. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, roll call vote. Trustee Grist?
Aye.
Trustee Martinez?
Aye.
Trustee O'Connor?
Aye.
Trustee Toasty?
Aye.
And I am the aye too. Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then item 7 is the consent items. Does anyone want to propose an approval?
I make a motion that we approve consent items 7A through K.
I'll second that. Go ahead, Kathy.
A second.
Okay. Trustee Grist?
Aye, we have a second? Okay, aye.
Trustee Martinez?
Aye.
Trustee O'Connor? Aye. Trustee Toasty?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you. Not used to this being online. What is the next?
Approval
the
of
minutes.
minutes.
Number 8.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to get there. Okay, item 8 is approval of board minutes for August 22nd, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the board minutes, August 22nd, 2023.
Can I
I
get
was
a,
in here, so.
okay, can I get
I'll
a second?
second it.
Okay, great. We'll do a roll call vote.
I watched on TV, but I was not present, so I cannot, I have to abstain.
Okay, great. Trustee Martinez?
I was not present either. Abstain.
Okay. Trustee O'Connor?
Approval.
Okay. Trustee Tosti?
Yes.
And I'm an aye as well. Thank you. 3 ayes and 2 abstains. So we're in item number 9A, which is a discussion and approval of project number 1723738, Sunny Slope Asphalt.
Okay, so good evening, board. This item 9A, has to deal with the asphalt on the vintage side of Sunny Slope that we have been sharing information on. This side of the campus has fissures and cracks. It is also part of the area where the vintage side of the playground will need to be replaced due to the settling of the foundation. So if we think about the newer side of Sunny Slope, that asphalt is new. The older side has needs that need to be addressed so that there are no risks for slips or falls from staff or students. So this project includes redoing an upgrade to the asphalt on the vintage side near the vintage playground.
Can I make a recommendation? That just in the future, we could maybe get a picture of the area. That way it's very clear as to what we're approving, what location is. I know, but most people probably would not know the details of the actual location that we're talking about. But this is not the parking lot. This is inside
This is near the playground.
where the playground is.
Yes, correct.
It's inside the fence.
Yes, it's on the school perimeter. Those of us that walk the facilities, we looked at those cracks. We looked at the need to address that area, and it's within the school campus.
And is it utilized by the students?
We have students on the vintage side that use that playground and that area. We have staff that walk that area every day to and from their classrooms. So it is definitely in use, and it was in use during summer school as well.
That's a safety issue.
Mhm.
You got a call.
Do we have any additional questions and or discussion? Okay, can someone propose a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve project number 1-7-23738 for Sunny Slope asphalt.
I'll second. And we'll do a roll call vote. Trustee Grist?
Aye.
Trustee Martinez?
Aye.
Trustee O'Connor?
Aye.
Trustee Tosti?
Aye.
And I am an aye. Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 9B is a discussion and approval of agreement with Earth Systems.
Yes. This item has to deal with the pre-construction services that we've talked about briefly in previous conversations with the board and previous messaging with the board and in previous meetings. We are looking at utilizing the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program funding to potentially add facilities to specific sites in order to have the ability to move forward with those projects. There is geotech work that needs to be done there. So this contract would allow us to move forward with the company called Earth Systems. We have used them for other projects to go study the earth, really, and take a look at any hazards that might be in place to see if bringing in facilities utilizing ELOP funds is doable at the specified sites, which are Calaveras, Sunny Slope, and Lad Lane.
So this would meet the requirements so that we could start maybe with the conversation of building.
Yes,
Will they be testing, is Aaron here? No.
yes, he is.
Oh, okay. Will they be testing for
Asbestos?
asbestos?
They'll be testing for asbestos. So what it says, it's a geotechnical evaluation
Mm-hmm.
and geohazard testing. So they test the soil for mold, they test the soil for asbestos, they test the soil for all kinds of different geohazard type things. So yes, to answer your question, yes.
Well, that's what we need to make sure that's done. Thank you so much.
Earthquake evaluations, et cetera.
Yes.
Microbial content, contaminants, chemical properties, radon testing, and material shrinkage, and any other construction issues that may arise prior to us, having any kind of work done at the site.
I have a question. On the last page of the contract from Earth Systems, it shows that the fees to be charged are a fixed fee of $22,300. Is that per site?
It changes a little bit per site, so if we go, each site has a little bit of a different number.
Okay,
Some of the area, some of the sites we're evaluating are a little bit larger.
which is how we came to that
That's
75.
correct.
Okay,
Right.
excellent, thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Okay,
So is this, okay, so now I'm looking at the
Make a motion.
fixed fees for 2 buildings. So does it matter, or are you going off the square footage? Like if we wanted to put 1 portable or 2 portables, or,
That's exactly it.
okay,
Yes.
got it.
okay. Can I get a motion to?
This is for 3 sites.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you said 2.
No, for 1 or 2 portables, it just
Oh, I
depends
see.
on the.
And then we're not calling them portable, what do we call them, cubes?
We'll call it a building,
Okay.
a school facility.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right, now you can ask.
That's okay, Ken.
Sorry.
Can I get a motion
Yeah, I'll
for,
make a motion that we approve the agreement with Earth Systems.
And I'll
That,
second it for her, just in case she needs a second.
I thought we did.
okay, great. And no additional comments or questions? Okay, great. Roll call vote, trustee Griss?
No, I thought we didn't have a second.
We did. Ms. O'Connor?
I
Okay.
interrupted you and I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Boy, I'm
You
lost.
know, it's just like click, 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 let's get this.
All right,
Okay, trustee Martinez?
Aye.
Trustee O'Connor?
Aye.
Trustee Toasty?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Our next item is 9C, the discussion and approval of project number 1723741, Sunny Slope Playground.
Perfect. So this proposal is for a specific project that has to do with the Vintage Side Playground. So this is the playground that through the discovery process of all the work that has happened, we have found that the foundation needs to be replaced. It's not one that can be repaired. It is a very old side of the school. With the settling of the ground, with the settling of the asphalt that's there that we will now be working on, we find that it's best to replace the playground now instead of in 2-3 years from now. So this proposal would allow for the district to move forward with installing a new playground on the Vintage side to meet the needs of its foundation.
I make a motion that we approve the project number 1-7-23741, Sunny Slope Playground.
I'll second.
Okay, great. Roll call vote, trustee Grist?
Aye.
Trustee Martinez?
Aye.
Trustee O'Connor?
Aye.
Trustee Toasty?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so passes 5-0. Item 9D, a discussion and approval of the 2022-23 unaudited actuals report.
Good evening, board members.
Good evening.
So, 1 year into this, and I am presenting to you your second unaudited actuals. This one, staff and I had a lot to do with, you had a lot to do with, and before we get going, I would really like to commend everybody, all of the administration, those at the school sites, and the board for taking this budget seriously. I'm really quite pleased with the way it turned out. We were pretty darn close to projections in most cases, and in places we aren't, we're going to talk about those.
Right.
And I need to do this because I don't want to get over my shoulder here. Is this all right?
Yeah. Can I say something before you start?
You can say anything you want.
I really like the way this was set up. I don't know about you, but the way that before you started and all the number stuff and everything, kind of was like a precursor about what we were gonna, a forward about what we're gonna read. That it's so difficult, especially for me with the eyes. It kind of gave us a setup, which we never really got before. Sometimes we did like a paragraph or two. But I really liked it. It was big and I could read it.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate that.
Well, and it's my attempt to compensate for the state having forms and writing that is way too small
Oh, yeah.
for even the most seasoned people to read.
Mhm.
All right, so
Thank you.
you're very welcome. Let's start with our budget calendar. I know you've all seen it before, but this is the end of the budget cycle for the 22-23 year. Everything up until this point has been budgeted. We adopt, what are we going to adjust it to, or what are we going to adjust it to one more time? Where do we think we're going to end the year? All of those are budgets. This is what we actually did. Okay, so this is going to turn around and be handed to the County Office of Education, but also to our auditors. This is unaudited actual, so they get this, and they do their audit thing, and then they will present us with an audit report probably December, January is when it comes. So we'll start with revenue. And as I go through here, almost everything is going to be talking about unrestricted revenue, although I did put in a slide for the status of restricted programs. It's a little bit later on. So unrestricted revenue, where were we at estimated actuals? Where did we think we were going to close the year? And then where did we actually close the year? The green is money. That's where we actually closed the year. And there were some significant adjustments. Some we knew about and some we didn't know about. The first one that I had no idea about is probably the largest one, and that's when our local control funding formula, which has got components that are our local income for property taxes went up a little bit. Our state aid went down a little bit, but in the middle of that calculation is the Education Protection Act. It is a separate calculation, and the state has been running completely wild with where that funding is. It's a component of all of the enrollment in the state of California and the available funds in the state of California. We start off with one estimate, we end up with another estimate, and at the end of the year, they pull money back from a previous year. This year, that pullback was almost $1 million. That was completely unexpected. So that affects where we ended up the year. Our local control funding formula calculation was down. Even though we did our best for ADA and where are we in ADA, we were down 92 ADA from projections. We recognized, I think it's fair to say, probably mid-spring, we probably recognized it even before that, but we've started the initiative for attendance. And it started with the joint board meeting with the high school. You know, the KIP is deeply involved in that. We have recognized since COVID that we have an issue with attendance, the number of days a student comes to school. And this just, as it plays out, and where are we after all of the final ADA is done, it played out to a loss of $856,000 below where we expected. Now, to be fair, when we did our second interim, that's done through the January. P2 is in April. So we would not have done anything with our ADA projections in January when we did that. At estimated actuals, there was a lot of stuff going on. Didn't feel like we were going to have any really big changes. So part of this is mine not to bring it to the fold, having had P2 and then the amendments that we were doing for some corrections that we were doing. Ultimately, we were down by 92 ADA. I believe that our CBEDs, and this is not going to be the same number that the superintendent shares with you periodically at board meetings, that comes actually out of our attendance system. But our CBEDS, the number of students that we know where every student in the state of California is on the first Thursday of October, compared to what our ADA is, 87%. That's what it was for last year. So we got some growth to do as we go forward. Now, what you will hear in the superintendent's report is what's going on every month, which means that if a student left after CBEDS, they're not counted in there, and so their ADA isn't in there. If a student came, we're only counting them from the time when they actually showed up in March or April through that ADA. So that is going to be a more dynamic number and a more what's going on today number. From the budgetary standpoint, we have to pick something that we're going to start with and then branch out from. CBEDS, again, is the day that we know where every student in California is. And so that is just a number, and that is what's been used in my attendance projections annually to say CBEDS for all of these years, P2 ADA for all of these years. What's that ratio look like? Where do I think it's going to go? Is there a trend? And so those things will be evolving as we go forward, and certainly, hopefully, it'll be a whole lot better as we move forward on this attendance initiative. One of the things that did end up happening to the good in our local control funding formula is we're required to share our property taxes with our local charter school. Their ADA went down, so we didn't have to transfer quite so much property taxes to them. Down on the bottom, contributions to restricted programs. This is actually a pretty cool one. SELPA funding came in $913,000 higher than we were projecting, and we really didn't even get those numbers until probably July-ish. So those final numbers coming in, we know what all that funding is going to be. We make those adjustments. And then contracted services was the biggest chunk of not having to spend $1.3 million. Now, having said that, the amount that was put into the adopted budget last year was the same amount that was adopted for contributions in the previous year. 12 million and some change for special ed in particular. So that number just rolled in anticipation for some of those unknown things that are going to happen in special ed, and gets held in a contracted services account until we know what it's going to be. We do have contracted psychs, speech people, behavior people that are coming in, and so our contract, and some of them are non-public schools. Our contracts are very large, so at any time we could need a lot of money in that. It was sitting there, and it was ultimately not ended up being used. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question, because we're talking about unrestricted revenues.
Yes.
And so this is restricted funds.
This is the amount of money from the unrestricted fund that we did not have to give to special ed.
Okay, got it.
So we had
Because our
planned.
contribution, you're talking about the contribution.
Correct, we are in contributions going out. That is correct. So we had planned on our budgeted $12 million and some changes of contribution to special ed. We only made $10 million. That's that interim contribution that I actually made at second interim, so you could actually see things going over. We did not need to change
I
that.
appreciate that, because I think the fact that, you know, we can justify what we need to give and what we don't need, and what we don't need to give stays in unrestricted,
Absolutely.
because that gives us the option to then decide where else it needs to be.
Exactly, exactly. I want to give credit where credit is due, and unfortunately Gabe's not here tonight. I will say that as a brand new special ed director, he hit the ground running. He was on that budget. He was meeting with me. What do I do about this? What do I do about that? He is cognizant of the impact that the special ed program has on unrestricted, and he doesn't ask for extra money unless he really thinks that he needs it. So next time that you see Gabe, please let him know that you appreciate the effort that he's putting into this. There are other districts, other directors that might say, you know, it's just special ed, you have to just do it. He's looking at everything. What are the options? How can we do it differently? If I do this, can I then do that? So he is on top of that, and he is part of the reason we didn't have to make so much in our contributions. And then finally, we ended up moving $261,000 in summer school costs, which would have been held by the unrestricted fund. It's our share for either the LCAP or the unrestricted, in order to utilize categorical funds, so we did not lose the opportunity for those funds at the year end. We evaluate where are we on all of those, and are we going to have funds that are going to expire. We move that money into ELOP because the Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant is both after school and summer school, and it was already covering part of summer school. So rather than send quite a bit of money back, we utilized that money. That freed up money on our end. So,
Very smart.
anything else on revenue?
Just one question on,
Sure.
on the extra money that we turned over to, restricted funds, right?
The contribution?
Yes.
Mhm.
It could have been used in special ed? It was just free money?
Well,
or-
no, I think really what the issue is that we budgeted to put in a $12 million contribution.
Mhm.
That's what was in the adopted budget, and it never changed. The contribution in the year before was not $12 million.
Right,
Okay, so it was a budget that when the budget was adopted, and remember, we had somebody came in here, did
Right,
a
right.
yeoman's job giving you a budget.
right.
He said, what did we have in the year before?
Right, right.
Let's put that in there for
Done
safety
that, yeah.
reasons. Okay, so I don't think it was, we had money that we could have spent on special ed. That is not the issue. The issue was that the budget was too high, and I was too cautious to move it down
Right,
as we got closer to the
I
end of the year
understand.
because it's such a dynamic program.
I get it, but if we wanted to, can you lower class size in special ed, or lower how many grades are in special ed? Could that have been happening if we knew that was an issue?
If we knew what, I'm sorry, I think I missed the issue.
I might be getting too in the weeds.
We're getting
Too much in the weeds,
Yeah,
okay.
that's not a
That-
question she
no.
can answer.
Okay,
That's right, sorry.
all right. So if we're good on unrestricted
Yes,
revenue, let's go to
yes.
salaries and benefits. So salaries and benefits, quite honestly, the way they stand, based on where we thought we were gonna end the year, I'm quite pleased with that.
Absolutely.
There's a 1% variation.
Yeah.
On a $43 million budget, there's a 1% variation. But what was that variation? Well, it's very simple. We saved some money, once again, from what we would have spent in unrestricted and LCAP funds for summer school, and we moved them over to the over into the ELOP program. We had $569,000 approximately for the cost of the 6% to classified and HALC. We knew that was coming. We knew that was going to come out of fund balance at the end of the year, so it's not totally unexpected. But even with that hitting the budget, this is still something that we can really be pleased with. And then the other thing which really is going to have a little bit more of a conversation is in total, our substitute costs were almost $500,000 higher than we anticipated. So that was not expected. Now that is certificated and classified with the benefits attached. Okay? If you flip to the next page, I've given you a little historical information on what's been going on with the cost of substitutes.
So let's talk about the classified salaries before we turn the page,
Okay.
because we're $500,000.
But that's with the raise that we gave them, Jan.
Oh, okay, is that
It's
what that is?
incorporating that 6%
Okay.
raise.
All right, that's
why.
what, I just want to make sure.
Yes.
I was, okay.
And then the benefits are
You know,
captive.
you know who you're dealing with.
You're fine, you're fine. It's your board meeting.
Explain.
It's your board meeting and it's just 6:30.
Okay.
All right, for the next one, I've given you a chart
Right.
so that you can see what has been going on for, with the substitute cost for the last 4 years. Now, the 2021 year, that was the shutdown year, so that doesn't really count a lot,
No.
but it's there, so we have a continuance. The year before that, the 1920 year, yes, we closed on March 15th, 16th, something along those lines,
Yeah.
but we were open most of the year before that.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's really April, May, 2.5 months short of a full year.
Mhm.
So I put instructional costs separate from support costs so that they wouldn't all get muddied up. But you can see what's going on with the various different categories. The instructional, the certificated substitute costs that type of an increase is not a function of the sub rate that we're paying. It's a function of the utilization of those subs. We're having more people out needing subs on a much larger basis than we have in the past. So I say that to let you know, because you'll know that you raised the sub rate last year, but you didn't raise it by that much. You didn't raise it by that much over the year before, over 2 years before when we were open for 3/4 of the year. So this is a utilization thing that's going on here.
Do you do a little deeper dive with HR as to analyze the absences as to the reasons? To
No, I
have
did
a
not.
better understanding?
I did not. I will say that the long-term absences with teachers, let's say, having to do with maternity leave, year over year, don't change that much. So those long-term subs, which do garner a higher rate, the utilization on that is probably not a whole lot more year over year. So something that's in the air. Somebody comes back and has a baby and their neighbor next door says, oh, so you didn't think I'm gonna have one. And so it kind of does this with the utilization for those. These tend to be more of the daily sick, and in fairness for last year, we were on edge and we were very, very careful. If you don't feel good, stay home.
And that's what that
Right.
was the other component that I was gonna ask, if it
Could-
was a COVID.
We don't have an
illness or-
absence, we don't have an absence for COVID, we have sick leave.
Well, we do, but I mean, there is a way to track it through our nurses, and I mean, if you called in and you said, you know what, I tested positive, what's the protocol? Most people were going off the guidance that either the school nurse or the administrator or supervisor would give them, right?
Right.
Can
Can I say that this is COVID related? I cannot.
right.
And if I were to speculate, no, let me rephrase that. If I were to give an opinion on this, I would have expected more absences in the year before than in last year. Because COVID was more rampant. We were just coming back. We were highly attuned to, I think I'm gonna sneeze, I don't know what this is. I don't wanna get my friend sick. So I would speculate that it might have been higher the year before. Also, the year before, we did have more staff, a little bit, not a whole lot, but we did have more staff. So for all of those reasons, I don't know, and I am not in a position to tell you that it was COVID or that it wasn't COVID. But, if you're asking my opinion as I look at this, I would say it's probably not, as it grows up, COVID related. You can see what's going on in support with custodial and clerical. They're also going up. Custodial has skyrocketed, just as we're pointing things out. Over the years before that, where it was relatively, it was kind of riding the wave. We're saying, plus or minus, even now. And the reason that there are absences noted in the clerical side or in the support side in 2021 and not in the instructional side is because most of our support staff were here during the shutdown, doing all of those support things that still needed to happen.
Is there any documentation of the number of days that the principals, the resource teachers, the VPs have subbed? Because I think that if we're going to create a larger budget to cover the amount that we need for subs, whatever they're doing should be counted in as well.
You're correct, and you actually bring up a good point. Substitutes are a challenge for us when it comes to teachers. They're a challenge for everybody. We're not unique in that manner. And there were many days when people from the district office would go over and support a school site because even their administrators were not enough to cover all the classes. So that is a good point. I don't know that we readily have that available, but perhaps it's something that we can gather and we can talk about. I'll take the lead from the superintendent and we can maybe put a plan in, but that's a very good point. Okay. All right. Any other questions on salaries and benefits? Okay. So if we go to page 6, we've got supplies and services. And the supplies and services are very interesting in lots of different ways. I'm going to talk about those. First and foremost, the budgets that we adopt and that we roll out to school sites and departments are authority to spend. You have the authority to spend. We do not encourage use it or lose it. We also don't give anybody carryover if they don't spend it. It goes back down to the bottom and it gets redistributed up. So what you're looking at in this page in particular is the authority that we had to spend and what did we actually spend and what are those differences. So at the top, almost $1.6 million for the LCAP unspent. Part of that is the summer school portion that was in the LCAP that got moved over into the ELA. And we'll talk about the LCAP in a minute or two. We had a couple of other one-time funds that we needed to use before they expired. Some of those have to do with ESSER because those have expiration dates or they had just dwindling amounts of money in them. Let's get rid of the little things and concentrate on the big accounts. So we saved about a little bit of money there, about $139,000. $132,000 in unrestricted contracts not used. Given the size of the contracts that we have for unrestricted, which would be those at the district level and those at the school sites, they'll contract for things like, what am I thinking? They'll contract to get a bus to take them on a field trip. So there's contract budgets in there. Or they'll bring somebody in for Red Ribbon Week in order to inspire students to not partake in drugs and alcohol. So those are all contracts. So we saved some money there. We saved $50,000 in utilities, which is actually pretty good. We can thank our cool spring and the heat not coming quite as quickly as it did and not as long as it has in many other years. The wetness, you know, as annoying as it is, didn't have or had a positive impact on our utility bills. And then the sites in total left $127,000 of the lottery funds unspent.
127 or 27?
Pardon me, $27,000.
Okay, I was like, what?
It's such a small number. $27,000 unspent, and that's across all of them. Now, they also have some Title I funds, and they are supported by their by the Instructional Services Department. The Ed Services Department do a lot of things with getting the books and stuff. I do not have data for which sites did what. I don't know that that's productive in an open setting. But again, it's their authority to spend, and they didn't spend it. So I would like to think that to a small extent, everybody was in on this, let's watch the budget, okay? We were all invested in it, whether or not it was just at the district office or as at the school sites. I think that there was some small component of that all the way around the district, and so credit all the way around.
Were you still doing the goldenrod or the processing of spending to monitor all of that?
We have budget blocking.
Yes, we put budget blocking in. So our system will allow us to block any requisition that tries to go through if there's not budget. We did that in October. It started this year before school sites came back.
Good.
So
That's helpful.
the system actually does a lot of that work for us, which then requires that the school site say, I'm trying to put in a requisition for widgets, and it's telling me I don't have any money in my widget account. Okay, but I see that you've got money in your travel and conference account. Maybe you want to move some of that money. Then they're required to give us a budget transfer because sites administratively are responsible for their budget. So we give them that responsibility to say, all right, I want to spend it this way and not this way. So they'll give us that, we'll make the adjustment, and then the requisition can come through. That's gone a long way in curbing the overages that you've seen in previous years.
Okay, on that same note, so, because you said that anything that is not spent goes back to the district. Okay. So the reason that it was staying at the school, because we previously had always done that, and what happened is some schools were deliberately overspending because they knew they weren't, nobody cared. And then the schools that were really trying to stay with the budget were really being penalized. So then they said, okay, you keep what you don't spend. That's why that came into play. It's because we had some schools that overspent. So now, you keep what you, and schools that were I don't know, half to them, the ones that overspent.
Mhm.
So in regard now, you're saying that, the money goes back to the district, but the school site gets a block of money, which they can move around any way they want legally.
Within that
Within
budget, the
their-
lottery budget,
right.
because they get lottery funds.
Right, within that block that they have, and it's legal, you know, it's not used incorrectly.
We're not having a beer party.
I know, they didn't invite us. Anyway, but that would work out and, is that kind of the same thing or no?
So I'm not sure how long ago it was that you let school sites keep any of their money.
Oh, it's a long time ago.
Okay, well, that's actually great news. I know that it wasn't the year before I got here because
no.
everything was tightened up in that year.
Right.
And you are not incorrect in that some school sites, because monitoring that budget on a daily, weekly,
Right.
monthly basis is a lot, and maybe somebody was watching and maybe somebody wasn't. There was a lot of
Right.
turnover at least the year before I got here.
Mm-hmm.
There were some school sites that just went hog wild
Yeah, no, we're
because
not-
there was no accountability.
right,
And then there were some school sites that
really
were,
cared.
okay, they cared, but they were attentive, okay?
Right.
Maybe they hadn't been here long enough and
To realize.
were bold enough,
Yeah.
you know? So, that is in fact true, but that budget blocking stops that.
Okay.
And so, yes, anything that's not spent goes down to the district unrestricted fund. It's unspent, just like all the other things that we're talking about here. And then our budget is built and it goes to feed some of that stuff.
Now, if there's something special that a school site wants to do, and they come to the cabinet, and let's say they've got X amount of dollars, maybe 1/3 or 1/2 of what they need to do, but the school site really wants to do something, is it possible that they could be given that extra funding, or is that a no-no?
Well, your budget manager would say, I know you'd really like to have that Lamborghini, and it's a beautiful car, and you've got 1/10 of that. But
I said
you've only got money
50%.
for a Prius, and so you're probably gonna have to get a Prius.
Okay.
All right, so that's responsibility in the budget. Now, if there's something that needs to happen, then I'm gonna refer you to all the work that Erin has been doing for the last year with the facility needs analysis and the playground, replacements and the changing of the fall material and the roofing that we're doing. That is outside of school sites. School sites are not responsible for paying for that. We give them money to run an educational program,
Right.
which means books and supplies, and if they're gonna have an assembly, maybe they're gonna do that. And whatever it is in order to impart the education to the students, and some administrative funds to keep their school running so that there's post-its in the front office, as an example.
Okay.
We give them money to deliver that education. The bigger stuff really does come to the district. So to answer your question, and I'm jumping in front of the
Yes.
superintendent, but I think we're on the same page. If there was something really big, we'd probably know about it before they brought it to us, and we'd probably be discussing. And whatever happened to cabinet would really depend on what the situation was.
Well, yeah, I'm just hoping that we leave the door open, that maybe 1 or 2 school sites have an idea, and they or grade levels, and that we can help district-wide, those grade levels or a couple of schools or whatever, come together and they can have, in other words, the door is not totally shut. And that, with uses and that kind of stuff, that we can do something that we feel is educationally appropriate.
Absolutely. My door's always open.
I know that.
The light's always on. So we have discussions at length. Students first. First and
Right.
foremost, we always talk about students and instruction. And if there is an issue or a need or an expense that has to deal with students, that is the priority. And we have had those discussions where there might be some sort of specialized thing that was not planned for. Are there categorical funds that can cover that? Does it fit in an LCAP goal or an action step of the LCAP? So those conversations definitely happen. Do we have The ability to have carte blanche? No,
No, yeah.
not at all. That's why we are stable right now.
Mhm. Right. But I just don't want people to think that our door is always shut. And that our public, that we do open our door a little bit. And if it is of good educational quality, and it's going to be for, lots of students that will benefit from it, that we do have an open ear and that we're not closed-minded.
Sure.
That's what I'm trying to do.
And I'm not sure if you have a specific instance in mind, and this is probably not the place to talk about that, but I'll say in generalities, we have money that the Ed Services Department has
Mhm.
for professional development. Those are
Right.
things that tend to get spending. For instructional materials and licenses to get access to things.
Mhm.
Those are things that the school sites are not necessarily responsible for. So there's a lot of support that's given from the district level
Mhm.
to scaffold and support, and one school wants to go to this particular professional development because it fits with an initiative that they're working on, and this one wants to go somewhere else because it has to do with behavior. We have funds for that, they do come to us for that, and pretty much as long as it's not really crazy, there's a lot of support for that.
Yeah.
The LCAP also has been written with a lot of support for things like professional development. I'm using that as an example.
Mhm.
So, our district plans on all of those things, and they may not always be spent with this money.
Right.
Now, you got Board Policy 3100, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, but within that board policy, it states that we must use restricted funds first,
Right.
wherever possible.
Mhm.
So that's part of what some of that savings was, sort of
Mhm.
catching up for the end of the year. That is definitely the thing that we look at if we're seeing, we've got that special request.
Right.
Do we have funds that fits into? Yes, we have funds that fits into.
Right.
So, just, there's a lot of support that's going on that's maybe a little bit more quiet, a little more personalized to the school sites, but they're generally not completely shut down.
Right.
I require them to be responsible for their budget, but we don't,
Yeah.
we try and find that better, yes.
Right.
Or better, no, whichever way it ends up being.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. The last thing in here are, we're allowed to charge administrative fees to the developer fee fund. That's a coverage or a recovery of the cost that it takes us to deal with those fee requests, do the annual accounting for those, the postings for those, all of that. It's a flat 3%. In any other area of this budget, it would be called indirect. For this one, it's not called indirect.
Oh.
It's a contra fee, so it's in the 5,000. I cannot tell you why, but it's been like that forever. So, we went ahead and I don't think that the district has charged those before, but I'm looking for as much money on the bottom line as I possibly can. So, any other questions on that?
That's great.
All right, unrestricted transfers. So we have a couple of different kinds of transfers that happen. We have transfers to restricted funds. We do have transfers from restricted funds in the way of indirect, which is an overhead type of a charge. And then we have transfers to the county office and then debt service. Those end up getting lumped together even though they are polar opposites of what they are.
Mhm.
So our charges for our students in county programs, primarily our preschool, went up by 78,000. That and some of the special ed transportation that the county office is covering, but it's primarily for our preschool kids. Our indirect charges went down because not all the categoricals spent their money. We build their budgets in the same way we build our budget, with authority to spend because you're going to get that much money coming in. And then we put in a budget to say we're going to get our indirect and then you can spend the rest of it. Well, they didn't spend all of their money. And then our transfers to restricted funds, oh my gosh, we actually got one dead on.
Mhm.
That is the transfer to Fund 40. There's two components of that. One of those is for the facilities. It's our required match for the city contract. And the other one is our funding for device replacement in support of the instructional program.
Wow. Did you blow up a balloon and go, woo?
I did. I actually did.
We do the matching, right, for the contract that we have with the city?
It's a $45,000
Yeah.
annual. Would be their match, even though it's not really, they go up and then we go up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's a separate fund to work on projects that are joint owned, correct?
I'd have to go back, I believe there's a specific project that's actually identified in there for the future, which we haven't moved on, and then some of it is some of that joint use stuff that we're doing.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at that agreement in really quite a while, so I don't want to answer with a yes or no, but that is a component of it.
Right, because it's, I mean, I pretty much have deep dived into that one.
Excellent, excellent.
But that, I know that that money is there for those types of purposes. I know there was something else with Rancho, but I don't know that that's ever gonna come forward. But I know we're supposed to meet occasionally with the city to also discuss the contract and if there's changes that need to be amended to it, especially the costs of what it takes for us to water or mow or the, you know, do an evaluation
Mhm.
of what our costs are.
Mhm.
So that it's,
We're keeping up with the costs.
we're keeping up with the costs and not just keeping a status quo. That's what I'm worried about.
The amount that they are paying the district for facility use has gone up every year. The last 5 years, I think I went back and looked. So every year it's gone up by $35,000. I believe that's off the top of my head. I can bring something back to you at a later time
I'd be interested to know the percentage
of,
the increase of what they're paying.
it's in the contract, and for
Yeah.
whatever reason, I think it's a percentage,
We'll
but
talk about
we
that.
can talk about it at another time. So if we're good with that, we can go to
Yes.
page 8 and talk about unrestricted reserve summary. So the very top of this is just the cliff notes, the total revenue, the total expenditures, the variations between the two. At the time that we did estimated actuals, we thought the entire unrestricted general fund was going to have a net loss of $254,000. Deficit spending by $254,000. After we have completed unaudited actuals, we in fact increased our fund balance by 1.9, almost $2 million. Why? The breakdown. The unrestricted portion that doesn't have any other name attached to it ended up going down by $254,000. Or actually, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong column, went down by $553,000 in net. So there were savings and there were additional costs having to do with, let's just say the retro, the big one,
Yeah.
and some savings in various different areas. The LCAP had $2 million worth of savings. The lottery ended up with $596,000 worth of savings. And then the Education Protection Act went down by 102 in the net. And what that is a cut in the money and then money that we didn't end up spending. And quite honestly, the Education Protection Act is a sweep. It needs to be spent on instructional services. And what we do at the end of every year is we take teacher salaries and benefits and move them from unrestricted into the EPA and apply them that way. That is where this district has decided to dedicate its EPA funds. It's just a moving, okay? So that's sort of the summary of where we are. We kind of talked about the components. Anything before I move on? Yeah, let's talk about LCAP. How is it that the LCAP ended up having 1.9, almost $2 million worth of savings? Lots of different reasons, but mostly using categorical funds. So goal 1, and there are 13 different actions in goal 1. But there's a couple of really big ones, 2 or 3 really big ones having to do with professional development. We moved those over to categorical funds where we could. Summer school, we talked about that earlier. We took the summer school costs that were in the LCAP, we moved them over into expanded learning opportunities so we wouldn't have to send any money back there. And we had intervention teachers that we had put into that budget, but we didn't end up hiring until this year. Now they went into that budget not at the beginning of last year, but really pretty much at the end of the spring of last year with the hope that maybe we could hire and do some things over the summer and then be, running by the time we got to August, but we were really only able to hire those this year, so they started this year. In goal 2, professional development again, and the athletics program is in goal 2. It's an initiative that brings kids a closer connection to the schools. Better academics will allow you to participate in athletics. That's always a hot little connection there. But it got started late last year, so there was some savings there. In goal 3, it's professional development. We have professional development all the way through this. This district, in its LCAP, and then with everything else that it flows out to and what we do, is committed to professional development in every way that we possibly can. We're looking for better teachers, we're looking for better instruction, we're looking for different ideas of delivering that instruction, and we're supporting it in all kinds of different ways. And then in goal 4, we had put in an action for parent education programs, and with everything else that was going on last year, they just didn't get started. So it's still there, we still want to do them. We have our new community schools program that's coming online and active this year, and so that is probably going to start picking up, and we're going to have more of those opportunities. So it'll be spent this year. So in total, there was $1.8 million worth of savings from those goals. The revenue increased by $198,000, and we had a prior fund balance from the year before that rolled forward, which leaves you with the $2.2 million worth of fund balance that's in the LCAP. Now, that is not, even though the LCAP program is considered unrestricted, it's not really anymore. It used to be when it first started, and any money that was left in that program could be taken by the unrestricted general fund and done whatever. And I dare say this district did the same thing that every other district. If you had some savings, you just moved it. You just didn't let it roll. That is no longer an option, and it started with last year. And even though they don't call it a categorical, we need to treat it like a categorical. So any money that's left in the bottom of that stays in that, we call it a resource, stays in that resource to be dedicated towards those unduplicated pupils that generated that revenue. For this district, the point that I want you to hang on to is our unduplicated pupil count is going down, which means that we are going to get less money this year, assuming that we don't get a whole lot more of our new students that are unduplicated, and then more money or less money the year after that. And we knew that. It was going down from 67%, what we're funded, 67% to 64% to 62% to 61, 59% is where we're going to end up next year. This money is going to help smooth that out as we go forward. And we now have an LCAP that we really are invested in. And we did some hot things right away, and we still have a few more of those hot things that might be like one-time things. And then we will go into a maintenance type of a level as we build out the next 3 years with the LCAP. This is going to allow us to smooth out those reductions in funding.
So we're not having to make cuts.
So we're not having to make cuts. Because the plan is good and the plan is solid, but the plan has a lot of personnel in it to do those things that we need to do. Any other questions on the LCAP? Okay, so the next page is a larger, not diced up, unrestricted summary of what happened in those. This is your categorical funds. This will include your title funds, like federal special ed and state special ed. It'll include Title I, migrant education, a few state funds that are in there. It also includes routine restricted maintenance and some state programs, including the remainder of the ESSER funds are in here. So there are ESSER funds in the orange that got spent, but some that didn't get spent. So those savings really reflect the difference between spending authority and actual expenditures for things we need. Now, what is in here that you're not going to necessarily see is as we move things to categorical funds to spend them, that has taken those variances and made them smaller. So we're carrying over probably $13 million more than we had planned. But that really, again, is a matter of authority versus what we actually did. And even in our best day, we never would have been able to spend all of that money. Some of that money is intended to take 2 and 3 years to roll. Okay. Any questions on this?
Where we have totally spent all of our federal monies from COVID.
No. We have one more coming into this year that we are acutely aware of. And, you know, I spoke to the fact that we don't want to lose the opportunity of
Right.
any one-time money.
Mhm.
That is one of those that we have got, you know, an eye on. And sometime in the near future, we'll probably have some sort of a budget study session, and we'll talk about some of those things. We have talked in the past about people who are
Right.
funded with those and what do we want to do with them and making those decisions. We'll address those in a format that's more of a budget study
So we
session.
don't have it yet,
We don't, oh, we have some of it.
some of it.
So, the federal government, depending on the day and the department you're working with,
Right,
sends you
right.
all your money up front.
Mhm.
And some wait until you've spent the money and you've done some reporting and then send it to you.
Right.
It's not consistent between which federal program or which title or ESSER or not ESSER.
Mhm.
We do have most of this ESSER money, which is why it's going to fall to the fund balance.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Okay, let's talk about reserves. So these are just reminders. The board passed an amendment to Board Policy 3100 in October, I believe, last year, where you actually put into board policy this board's minimum reserve of 10%. And then anything above that would be addressed at the time by the board. How do we calculate that? We take 100% of the expenditures on the unrestricted side and the restricted side, and we lump them together. We add in any transfers that are going out to that number, and we calculate 10%. That is how we know what our percentage of fund balance is. Okay, in this case, we're looking for 10. What do we exclude from those reserves? The non-spendable amounts. Any inventory that we have in the warehouse for custodial inventory or paper. This district supports the school sites by providing them with paper at no cost to them. Our revolving cash balance, even though you're going to spend cash, it's considered non-spendable. And any prepaids that we might have, which this district doesn't have any prepaids. And then what is left after the 10%, after the non-spendable, are amounts that can be, that we'll recommend spending on, and that we'll leave to the board to make those recommendations in accordance with board policy. And so this unaudited actuals has one recommendation from me for an assignment, and then it has money that is left over. We'll talk about that on the next page. So you now have a side-by-side of unrestricted and restricted. The beginning fund balance, the increase to fund balance, because in net, for both of those sides of both of those columns, they both increased, and what the ending fund balance is. And then what happens to those ending fund balances? We start off with restrictions, and the non-spendables get restricted first. We had no inventory at the end of the year, but we had a cash balance in our revolving cash of $5,000. The board approved an increase after year end, so it won't be reflected until the next time we come together. And then I've restricted the LCAP carryover for those reasons that we discussed a moment ago. On the categorical side, all of those balances are restricted. So then you're left with what is the unrestricted ending fund balance. We have our commitments and requirements. We have a board policy for fund balance to be reserved, committed by board policy for that 10%. And then we have a requirement for our reserve for economic uncertainty. So for a district this size, we need to set aside 3% for those economic uncertainties, and the 10% includes that 3%. So what you see on the line that says committed board policy 3100, that's 7%. Plus 3% gives you $8.2 million or a 10% reserve at closing.
So this is our cash is king.
This is not your cash is king. That is your fund balance.
Okay.
That is your,
Cash.
you'll run out of cash long before you run out of
Is
this.
this like a couple of months, a month?
8 million, I didn't do the math. I can bring it back to you on another time. We have talked about it, how many months
Right,
with
yeah.
salary. I didn't do it, I'm
That's
sorry.
That's okay.
What we have left is $156,000. It's not a lot, so we're just a smidge over 10%. At our last board meeting, we approved the 1-year extension for our students, our first student transportation contract, which had a 15% increase in it. And so based on that, Staff is recommending that we set aside $103,000 for that increase. And then what's left is $53,000 for the board to decide if they want to do something specific with that or just let it ride. Now, before you have that conversation, I'm going to tell you that when we look at where we are in the adopted budget, it's not a 10% reserve. And it's not a 10% reserve because the math, well, the procedure for that math is the same, the numbers are different. When we get into the adopted budget, we once again have spending authority. So the budgets are going to be higher than what we actually spent at the end of this year. And because the budgets are higher, 3%, 10% of that is going to be higher. And so even if this same $8.3 million carries over, that percentage that is to our expenditures that are in the budget for this current year right now makes that percentage smaller. Think about that for a minute. Some of you are kind of running it over in your head saying, what did she just say?
I think
You
you're
need
saying we haven't
You need a
settled.
chart.
I do probably need a chart. Okay, so
Visual learning.
let's do this, all right?
You poor woman.
No, you guys are good. You guys are good. We split the dais between Trustee O'Connor and Trustee Toasty. We close the books with those. We have 3 people there. Okay, that's our total cost. 10% of that is 3, or 0.3 actually. All right. If I have more expense, and if I'm going to divide this by that, it's going to give me a much higher percentage. When I add in the expenses of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people at the dais and do a percentage of that and divide it by this, the spreading out of that money gives you all less money. Okay?
Yep.
That makes sense that way?
Yep.
So when we come to first interim, you're going to do it. And I know you're going to do it, and it's okay. You're going to say, but didn't we close the books with 10%? And why don't we have 10%? It's because our budgeted expenditures, our spending authority is higher. Okay? And so it's something that we work on. The percentage does not stay the same. We do not have anything in board policy that requires that we take all of this money and we go hide it somewhere. We don't have enough money to do that. I would never recommend that at this juncture. We are just coming out of some pretty rough years. Let's let it ride for a while. So that number is always going to change depending on what the budget is at any given time when we do that math. Okay? All right. So now that I've had that conversation, and I go back to if the board wants to do anything with that unassigned ending fund balance, this would probably be the juncture that you would do it at, or you can save it for a discussion at another time.
My inclination is to save it for another time. So we have the ability to,
We don't have to make a decision right now. We'll just
right,
see what happens and go with the flow.
It's $53,000. That's right. And tomorrow things are going to change. We adopted a budget that lived within our means, and even since then, things have changed.
Yeah.
You know, and we need to respond to those changes, so.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this point, staff is recommending to the board that they approve the unaudited actuals unless there's any other expenses or questions.
okay, can we get a motion to approve the unaudited actuals as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve 9D, unaudited actuals report for 22-23.
I'll second. Let's do a roll call vote. Trustee Grist?
Aye.
Trustee Martinez?
Aye.
Trustee O'Connor? Aye. Trustee Toasty?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Motion passes 5-0. Our next item is 9E, discussion and approval of resolution 1223/24 to establish the 2022-23 GAN limit.
So there are several things throughout the year that we will do that are somewhat custodial. We just do them because we have to do them on certain timings. This is one of them. In approving the unaudited actuals report, you have actually approved the GAN because it is a component. It's extracted from our data, and that GAN limit calculation is done for us within the state software. This has no effect on us as a district, and quite frankly, I can't tell you a district that I know of that it really does have an effect on. Maybe some of the states, not ours, basic aid districts, it might have an effect there. But really the idea of this that started ever so many years ago was that the increases in the spending of government would be curtailed to a certain percentage. Now, we do a GAN limit so that the state can have extra money to spend. To be very frank with you, because we are looking at the GAN legislation that went through says state government, and we are a component unit of the state government, not unlike the city. So everybody does that, and if we were a district and we had exceeded our GAN limit, we would have to petition to the state for them to share some of their GAN limit. That's actually what would end up having to happen. Again, I don't know of a district that's ever had to do that, but what happens is at the end of the year, you all pass the resolution, you've approved the calculation, we send it to the county, we send it to the state goes, whew, we're gonna be fine. You know, if they increased whatever they did for state's funding, all of the little bits that are gonna come from local governments are going to help ease them out. And then they're still in accordance with the law. So this really is custodial. There's not a whole lot that you can do about it. It's automatic out of the state software, and so I'm recommending that you adopt the resolution presented before you.
Can I get a motion?
Well, we're gonna do a discussion.
Do we need to? We can't. It's custodial, really,
Yeah.
right?
I just like, we always have to say any discussion.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? All right, can I get a motion?
Y'all make a motion that we approve resolution 12-2324 to establish the 22-23 GAN limit.
I will be happy to second.
Okay, great. We'll do a roll call vote. Trustee Grist?
Aye.
Trustee Martinez?
Aye.
Trustee O'Connor?
Aye.
Trustee Tosti?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
And one more.
Oh, you're up here for one more. I didn't know it was you who was up here for that. 9F, discussion and approval of the application to establish Marguerite May's parent-teacher organization.
So we have a board policy that says that all booster clubs and parent organizations need to be approved by the board. We are starting that initiative this year slowly. We have a lot that have been established previous to that. But Margaret Mays, and the principal is here, and I'm thinking a couple of their PTO reps in here. That's awesome. Margaret Mays, with its new principal and administration, was also approached by a new group of parents that said, we want to run a parent-teacher organization, which is awesome. And you can see the number in the item. You can see those that are dedicated to this. And so what we have done is we have made them go through that application process, which aligns with both Ed Code and board policy. They are our beta test, and we appreciate all of their efforts. They really did well. Now, as a new PTO, they haven't done any fundraising yet. They're going to leave here dancing because they can start their fundraising. But they don't have money yet to pay for all of the things that they need, like liability insurance. They are still pending, waiting for the IRS, and it moves at the speed of government to approve their 501c3 status. And there is one other thing on there, which I didn't bring my board item, but they have supplied us with everything else that's required to be supplied to the district and then to be presented to the board. So at this point, we are recommending that we approve this parent-teacher organization with the caveat that the missing items get presented to the district on the schedule that is in the board item. And if for some reason the IRS is going to take more than 6 months to do their 501c3, they'll reach out to Principal Woods, she'll reach out to me, and we'll work with them. But right now, with such an excited group, and I don't know if you want to talk to them, or they're here to support this item, but we're recommending approval.
Nancy, I would like to make a motion that we need to fix some spelling. It's Marguerite. And so we, on page 258, we need to spell her first name correctly.
Okay.
So we need to make fix the typos there.
Okay.
and there's a typo on the first page for principal. We misspelled principal.
Oh, my
And
bad.
otherwise, I think this is wonderful, and I'm really glad they're stepping up to the plate. Your discussion.
Any other comments?
I think it's great.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm excited for you all. I was really excited to see this item in the board agenda.
Right.
And I wish you all the best. I think it's a great idea.
So,
And thanks for taking it on.
Mhm.
with respect to the board policy, we'll be working slowly, gently through this year. There's some PTOs that have been here forever. We don't want to offend anybody, and we will work with them to get the same thing, and we'll bring them back to you. at that time.
The other thing is that it used to include students, was the PTSO.
This one, the organization that they're applying for based on the particular ed code is a parent-teacher organization. It does not include students. Students are in an ASB. And the ed code is very clear that
Yeah, I
students
read
are
it,
not
I
involved.
read all of this, because Rancho's the same way, it's a parent, teacher, student.
Interesting.
Well, I think it's because they were older, that wasn't with the little guys, it's just because it was middle school, junior highs. When I started, they were junior highs, So, and how do we take care of the changing of the PTSO?
Well, we'll work with each one of them individually to see what
Right.
they really have. Maybe they still have an S in there, maybe they don't, maybe it's just there.
Well, I was wondering
Because-
how you change the formality of that to go to this.
Well,
Yeah,
we'll work on that,
Right.
but ed code is very specific, that parent
no, I read it,
organizations
yeah.
are separate from student body organizations, so
Mhm.
that may be something that is vintage,
Mhm.
but has never actually been implemented.
Right.
But as we go through each one of them, we'll take a look at their bylaws, we'll see what they have to say.
Well, the other thing is that students can also participate in the site council. And we would have students participate in the site council, and that would also be in regard to leadership with the school. So that would satisfy that avenue where kids are getting that experience.
Along with their ASB class, because there's a pretty decent
There's a lot of
ASB
ways.
and
Absolutely. But I was just questioning how you're gonna dismantle that one and
one at a time.
one at a
Very
time.
gently. These are parents, and the last thing that we want to do is to drive parents away, so we will be doing it gently.
Well, I just wanted, that
Yeah.
we don't want to forget the kid.
No.
Okay,
All right.
so we need to make a motion.
Yes, would someone like to make a motion?
Okay, I'd like to approve the application to establish Marguerite May's parent-teacher organization.
Second.
Okay, great. Let's take a roll call vote. Trustee Grist,
Aye.
trustee Martinez,
Aye.
trustee O'Connor, trustee Toasty,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Motion passes 5-0. Congratulations.
Great job.
And thank you.
She's the vice president. I'm the PTO president, and she's the PTO vice president.
Congratulations.
That's great. So item 10, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we adjourn at 7:23, or 7:18. I apologize.
7:19.
Okay, 7:19.